Good evening and welcome. Got a very, very special guest tonight. We've got John Yates. He's a special guest. He's always a special guest, but the very special guest is a friend, David Clews. I've known David for a couple of years now. David is a political activist. I think that the best way to describe him, of the highest integrity, I would describe him as a moderate. I hope I'm not stealing his thunder, but as a moderate unionist patriot and all round a good egg, as we would say in England. So David's a good guy. David, if you just want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction, tell people where you're from, how you got into the position that you're in now, and just where you're coming from in general.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, Richard, and thanks very much for inviting you on the show. Some of you might know me from the shows that we do at UNN and also from the live streams that we do. I've been involved in politics since I was 24. I was elected as a local councillor. I've been a member of the Tory party. I've been a member of the Labour Party. But there's always been one constant, and that is a virulent opposition to separatism in Scotland and nationalism in Northern Ireland as well. So that's always been key in my focus. And for the last 2 years, we noticed a huge discrepancy with the mainstream media, and we set up UNN. And we've been going now for 2 years. We're just trying to do something a wee bit different, because one of the biggest obstacles that people like ourselves face is a hostile mainstream media that is hostile to unionism. It is hostile to people who believe in their country and just genuine working people concerned about the issues. So thanks for inviting me on, Richard, and really look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, it's your pleasure, David. And John, I just want to bring John in here. And normally this is something that we wouldn't indulge in, but I was so impressed with a poem that John read earlier on today, and it was written jointly by John and Jim Werner. And Jim's a patriot, a unionist, a man who again has fought for the cause for many, many years. And Jim and John penned this together, so they're kindred spirits. I think we're all probably kindred spirits on this feed. So John, if you want to read that poem, just to set the context of where we're coming from and give a little bit of hope to people that are looking at what's happening in the world and thinking, is there still a cause? Is there any hope left for the UK? But go on ahead, John.
There's always hope. So here we go. I can't help but wonder why so many people had to die for being British in our own land, murdered by cowards from their evil hand. The IRA crept back to their bed after leaving so many people dead. A soldier, a cop, a father, a son, a woman, a child, just anyone. But the Unionist people did not lie down, fought and defended the red hand and the crown. We stood ready and able. The IRA cried to come to the table. The Belfast Agreement was a disguise, built for appeasement, swindle and lies. The peace is a farce, guns are still there, and London afraid of another bomb scare. Appeasement after appeasement, day after day. Provosts in government still getting their way. And our two big parties, well, what can I say? They are sitting in Stormont with the IRA, not listening to the people who put them in place. They ask for support, then they lie to your face. A united unionist party, some say we need, but there's too much corruption, lies and greed. I can't help but wonder why so many people had to die for being British in our own land. You can never shake a terrorist hand. Think of our country, the red hand and the crown. Listen to the people and stop letting us down. Our leaders have blown the chance to make things right. A whole lot of unionism. The people, we must unite. So we reach out again with an offer of partnership. No time for politicians hell-bent on dictatorship. No puppets, no lackeys, our people deserve better. We will not be sucked in with the promises in letter. Meaningful and proactive is the only game in town. We long for a day when politicians stop letting us down. You have one more chance at putting things right, but this time we demand you stick to the fight. A roadmap must be drawn, agreed by everyone. No hierarchy, no pulling rank is exactly what must be done. An army of people must be put together with weapons of words, which will remain and abide forever. United we stand, divided we definitely fall.
Thanks, John. Thanks very much. If there was a big enough crowd, I'd give you a round of applause for that. I think that's a very poignant, and I think that, I don't know what you think, David. I mean, obviously, I see a mirror image, and that's why one of the reasons I brought you on tonight. I mean, I see a mirror image between what's happening in Scotland with the SNP, what's happening in Northern Ireland with Sinn Fein IRA, and the other nationalist parties, and I'd include the alliance in the nationalist parties. When you have an alliance politician for a unionist area standing speaking in Gaelic at his inaugural speech, it shows there's something going very, very badly wrong in unionist areas when we can't get a vote out to stop somebody like that coming to power. That's another story. So that's why I think we need to sort of see the comparisons. And then obviously when we look at England, we see what's happening in England with the various identitarian movements, whether it's the Black Lives Matter, the ethno-nationalists, the LGBTQ RSPV, or whatever the latest letters they're putting on. And all these things are about dividing people. And definitely the mode is to destroy the United Kingdom. David, if you could tell us what's happening in Scotland, tell us how dangerous the SNP are. Let's not dress it up. Let's tell us just how radical and dangerous they are. And also let's look at some solutions. What can the Scottish people do to stop the march of what I call them Euronationalists, the Euronationalists of the SNP?
What I think's very interesting is when we look at the history of the SNP were originally very much a Protestant party. The Labour Party very much had the Catholic working class vote in Scotland, and the SNP were considered a sort of a light Tory Protestant party. No self-respecting Labour person would ever have voted SNP, but in the last 20 years, and very much so in the last 10 years, there has been a massive shift in sort of tribal loyalties, and the SNP have very much courted a much stronger nationalist Republican vote and started winning, of course, seats in Glasgow. The SNP were originally, again, a Teuchter party. They would win seats up in the Highlands of Scotland, up in the islands, but with Nicola Sturgeon, they're very much tapped into a very anti-British vein, very anti-unionist vein as well. That wasn't something existed even in Scottish nationalism. And to be a unionist now in Scotland, or to come from the PUL community, you are very much a second class, third, fourth, fifth class citizen. And you really are dirt as far as the establishment's concerned. Now, we should be worried about the SNP because the SNP control everything. The media are totally in hoc to the SNP, especially now when online advertising is dead. They rely on government grants. The entire establishment is pro-SNP. The civil service, all of the charities, all of the sort of third sector organisations, yet they still can't get over that 50% mark. So what does that tell you about them? So the culture of the SNP has been one to destroy unionist thinking, pride in the United Kingdom, pride in Northern Ireland, pride in England as well. And do you know what? Sadly, they've done a very good job of it because it's a cultural war. You can't say you're British anymore up here. Any trace of Britishness has been eliminated. You only have to look at the things that used to have British in their name. They're all gone. Wow. It has been a subtle war that has been waged, and sadly, one they are winning.
When you say they're winning, David, I mean, obviously, one of the things that does give me hope is that, as we did with the Brexit vote, I mean, the odds were so heavily stacked against the good people, the thinking people, the intelligent people. And I'm going to sling the insults at the Remainers and the nationalists and the Shinners that they sling as us, because their plan is not coherent. It doesn't make sense and it doesn't add up. And I think what's happened is, in all of these votes, that the good, intelligent, thoughtful people of the United Kingdom and of Scotland, every time there's been a referendum, have stood up and says, no, we don't want to be shoehorned into some radical left-wing satellite state of the European Union that just happens to have a Scottish flag flying above it. Because I think the other thing is, what the SNP have done is they've hijacked a genuine pride in Scotland. If I was born in Scotland, I would be a very proud Scotsman. I'm born in England, I'm a very proud Englishman. But my Englishness does not make me want to smash the United Kingdom to bits. It makes me want to pull the United Kingdom together. Correct. And I know in my heart of hearts, there's many people like you, David, who love Scotland, but also love the United Kingdom and want to see it stay together. So how can we empower those people to, obviously, we're always, one of the things that me and John and everybody else that comes on these feeds always stress, we want to do this totally peacefully. We don't want to be doing this by any subterfuge or anything subversive. It's always peacefully and through the political means. But how can we encourage people like yourself to get engaged politically and make the change necessary to stop the onward march of the SNP?
I think that's a very good point, Richard. And the reality is, I'm not engaged politically now in Scotland. 99% of the stuff that I do on UNN is rest of the UK or rest of the world. The issue you have is the Scottish nationalists are a feral mob. They will find out where you live. They will try and destroy your life. It's not anyway like what our brethren in Northern Ireland went through in terms of bullets going off and etc. But there is a level of toxicity here that, if there is another referendum, could really go over. I think the problem is we've given so much to them. I think politically there must be a line in the sand drawn, and there must be no more. I mean, look, if I was running the show, I would stop devolution. I think devolution has been an absolute disaster.
I agree.
I think it is a joke of a parliament with joke politicians. However, I don't see that changing. What I think needs to be done is the UK government needs to take a much more proactive role in Scottish affairs, rather than just saying, well, that's up in Scotland, you do what you want. Now, the British taxpayer is paying for all the people in Scotland who are currently furloughed. The British taxpayer is giving the grants to businesses in Scotland, not the SNP. But you know what? The idiots in Westminster allowed the Scottish government to give out all these grants and make it look as if they were doing it. John will get this as well. Richard, you'll get this. English people don't understand the enemy that we are facing. They've never understood it. I mean, I'm not from Northern Ireland, but I was brought up in a background. I understand what you guys went through. I understand what you've dealt with. People down south, that sort of southeast bubble, they don't get who we're dealing with. We're not dealing with people that play with a straight bat. These people would we're dealing with people that want to destroy our country. And we've capitulated so much to them.
Absolutely right, and I think, John, do you want to comment on that from a Northern Ireland perspective, on what you're hearing David saying, and I mean, when David was saying the things he was saying about the SNP, I thought you could just change it to SDLP, Sinn Fein, Alliance Party, Belfast Telegraph, BBC, because they're all in it together, and they are. I mean, let's not be under any illusion here. The media, and this is why I'm so encouraged that what you're doing, David, because you are a media voice that says, no, I am a conservative media voice. The problem we've got with the BBC, the Belfast Telegraph, et al., is they are political activists that are masquerading as impartial journalists. Yep. And what do you think, John, the comparisons with what David just told us about SNP and Sinn Féin IRA?
Well, this is for the benefit of the people of Northern Ireland that is looking, and I guess also for the benefit of the wider spectrum. But I mean, I'm making two comparisons here. I sat and I listened to David there about how that the Feral bunch that follows the SNP, how that they would be very, very underhand in the way that they would try to say deplatform you, stop your marches, stand out against you, become the most aggressive, and the police then say, well, we can't have a parade, for example, because these people will riot and they're going to cause a public disorder. Now, I see a similar scenario happening in Southern Ireland at the minute. I mean, I was sent a video last night where there were people that were trying to speak up for their Irishness in Southern Ireland. And what actually happened was that the left-wing feral mob, they stewed, they chanted, they jeered, and the police facilitated it. The guards facilitated it. And I'm sure that's what you see happening in Scotland, David. But Northern Ireland, I have to say, and this has got to be a lesson that we have to learn, that we haven't actually reached that stage yet. And, you know, we're not too far down that rabbit hole. And unless our politicians stand up and take note that this is what's coming down our line, and we put in place mechanisms to try to ensure that it doesn't happen, well, you know, that's what we're in for. And that's what the people of Northern Ireland have got to look forward to. So, you know, looking across the board in terms of the people in England, and I'm glad you said that, David, is they don't actually understand, I guess, you know, where we've been and what we've been up against for many, many years. You know, I often say that you could learn a lot from Northern Ireland. And I believe that we really need to. I mean, these times are great when we can explain what it is that we've been through and try to steer people away from the I guess, the pitfalls and the downfalls and the things that can happen if you participate in a certain way. You know, this has got to be done peacefully, I believe.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the thing about it is, John, you know, when you say the people, the English people, and David, the English people don't understand, that is true to a certain extent. But I think what's happening is, and you see, the thing about English people is, in general, they're extremely tolerant. They're extremely easygoing. And of course, we're not portrayed like that, but that's the reality of the situation. It takes something really serious to get the English people off their backsides and away from, you know, going to the pub, playing cricket, just having a nice, quiet life. That's what English people are like. I'm not saying Scottish and Northern Irish people aren't like that, because most people are like that at heart. But the problem is, what we've always missed in England, we didn't realise how radical these enemies of the United Kingdom were, not just in Scotland and Northern Ireland. We've got them in England with the Labour Party, not just with the Labour Party, but many people in the establishment. We looked at that on the last feed last week when we looked at what's happening with certain parts of the establishment and so on and so forth. And I think England has sleptwalked into a complete disaster. And one of the things that really heartened me over the past year was, and I'm very aware of your time here, John, so I'm trying to talk quickly, David, I'm trying to talk quickly. One of the situations we had last year, when the Brexit deal was pushed, that looked like it was going to try and push Northern Ireland out of the Union, mm-hmm. we managed to galvanise support in all four corners of the United Kingdom. We had literally several hundred people protesting in London. We had tens and 20s protesting in Wales, and we had protesters up in Scotland as well, all protesting against the European Union, and we had a demonstration in Belfast, and they all happened simultaneously. Now, again, I don't know if that's ever happened before, but that shows that there is unionist sentiment. Well, it is. And the heartening thing was seeing a lot of people on the streets of London. So what's the solution, David? What do we do? What do we actually do to fight this?
What we need people down south to realise is that an independent Scotland and a united Ireland would be a disaster for England. You know, I'm quite friendly with Robin Tilbrook of the English Democrats. He comes on my show. I have a lot of respect for Robin. But the idea that somehow if England shakes free of all these hippies, they'll be fine is nonsense. You would have a pro-EU state on your northern border pushing all sorts of garbage across the Irish Sea. You know, you see what's happened in the Republic of Ireland. You would have a force in England that would say, well, look at these lovely progressive countries. Why aren't we more like them? It would be a disaster for the rest of England. So we need to mobilise more people in England and Northern Ireland to care about other parts of the United Kingdom. We've become so insular, you know, and so set up in our own ways. And again, this has been decades in the making. You know, once upon a time we had British Steel, British Rail, British Industries. A post day in Glasgow was the same as a post day in Cardiff or Bournemouth. And sadly, you know, we could go into a further talk about Thatcherism and the cause of that, but sadly, we have lost that sense of Britishness. We need to promote Britishness again, and unity. And again, British values. What do British values mean? Freedom, democracy, non-violence. Because again, this is the thing about Northern Ireland. It was the Unionists that were always portrayed as the violent rabble, the mob. The troubles in Northern Ireland was engineered by militant Republicans.
Absolutely.
Now, being honest, the nationalist community was pretty unfairly treated in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They had legitimate grievances, but those legitimate grievances were hijacked by rabid, bloodlustful Republicans who then, I mean, for example, we don't learn from history. The official IRA didn't want the Troubles to start because they knew how many Catholics would die, but that militant provisional wing
Can I just play something here, John? Because I don't believe. I mean, Gerry Adams famously said years ago about the IRA, "We haven't gone away." I'm just going to play you a very short clip of Mary Lou McDonald speaking, and you'll see that hasn't really changed much in the time that since. Let's have a little look here, see if we can find this. Yeah, here we go. Okay, just listen to what Mary Lou's got to say. Can you all see that, guys? Yeah.
This part of Ireland,
can you hear it? Yeah.
The European Union, and cause the level of jeopardy and damage that would entail, and that people will simply take it on the chin, or that he would expect that people would meekly go along with that, is deeply, deeply misguided, and that would be a very dangerous course of political action. The challenge now is for the British Prime Minister and for his Secretary of State and for the whole system to act demonstrably in the common good. Do I have a sense that that's what their intention is? No, I don't. I don't believe that we heard anything that would give us any great grounds of hope. But I wish to.
I think that's enough of Mary Lou. But what she's saying there.
Can I just jump in there, Richard?
Yeah.
The SNP have praised Sinn Féin. They've sat with them. They've broken bread with them. Now, again, sometimes you have to deal with people in politics you don't want to. The SNP have celebrated that fact. They have promoted, when Martin McGuinness died, they somehow made him out to be some sort of saint. And that's where the SNP are very dangerous, is they promote this form of militant republicanism, if we're being honest, and it is frightening because, sorry, I don't want Scotland to become the Ulsterization of politics. I would rather, but we are there now. We are there now, sadly, and again, it's about trying to work with decent people. And what I notice as well, one good thing about Northern Ireland is more and more Catholic people realise what a disaster a united Ireland would be. We already see the way in which abortion, the way it was cheered in the south, the way it was put in the north with no consultation. I think there's a silent majority of everyday hardworking Catholic people.
100%.
They don't like the way the island of Ireland is going, but they know there is hope in the United Kingdom.
If I could come in on that, David, the abortion thing's particularly close to my heart, not just because of Christian values, but I mean, I was adopted as a child, and I believe if abortion had been legal, there's a high chance that I would have never made it out the womb, but that's another story. So I really take abortion personally. Now, that said, I went to an anti-abortion rally in Belfast last year. It was very refreshing, and I spoke to the person I was with, and I said, look, this is very different to England, because normally when we walk through the streets of England, people are calling us Nazi scum and spitting on us. So it was refreshing not to be spat on at a demonstration. But the reality is that was Catholics and Protestants from all over Ireland, north and south. And I believe there is a border, and I'm not calling it the island of Ireland, but from Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland, Catholics and Protestants standing together to oppose abortion. And I tell you what, I mean, there was some very brave Roman Catholic speakers on that platform who absolutely castigated Sinn Féin IRA for not only murdering people during the Troubles. Well, they didn't mention that, but they now want to murder babies in the womb, north and south of Ireland. And that's Sinn Féin. That's what they are at the heart. They're a monster, and they are not patriots. They do not love the people of Ireland, because if you love the people of a country, you wouldn't want to murder them before they even got out of the womb. That's for sure. And I think that's a very good point that you brought up about the abortion there, David. 100%.
Yeah, and just listening to Mary Lou McDonald there and how that she was speaking, I mean, I'll use one word, and that would be delusional. And how is it that those people excel? Well, they excel because, you see, they have a raft of people that are on their side, because they've subscribed to globalization, the same as the SNP. They've all the help in the world, the media weight behind them, and their ideologues, which are in the media. And I honestly believe that Sinn Féin's days would be numbered if only that we had a level playing field. And I guess that level playing field that we don't have has a lot to do with our politicians, because our politicians won't actually stand up and call things for exactly what they are. And let me explain to you. I mean, one thing that I seen today was there was and this will maybe lead us on to something else here, Richard, but today in Belfast, there was a rally for Black Lives Matter. And in that rally, the BBC Northern Ireland on the Evening Extra programme, where the presenter was there amongst the crowd, and he says that the crowd was largely social distancing. And he says, well, it's not really their fault, but they couldn't really social distance in the middle. But that was it. There wasn't one more word about it. Now, can you imagine that had been a group of unionists or patriots or, English people demanding, that we leave the EU or whatever, or Scottish people?
Well, look at the abuse I got. Look at the abuse I got from all sides for a demonstration that I didn't even organise, that was falsely published in my name and in Jada Franson's name, and neither of us had anything to do with it. And our names were printed in every newspaper.
Disgusting.
Local and national, and there hasn't been one apology.
Nothing.
I've written to loads of those papers. I can't afford to sue all those newspapers. Neither can Jada. So we've just got to suck it up, and that's just the way it is. David, I know you've got to go at 8 o'clock,
and I'm disappointed to have to go, because we'll definitely do this again and have a bigger chat, Richard. Yep. As I said, we can get you and John on our show as well sometime, because the one thing I would say to people, and this is key, I keep talking about this all the time. Stop watching the mainstream media. I know a lot of you don't fall for the propaganda. Just try and waken people up to the fact that these people hate you. They hate what you stand for. They hate your family. They hate the fact that you've got pride in Britain, that you aren't following their groupthink. The blob cannot ever be changed. The mainstream media is globalist. It is anti-British. It is anti-working class patriotic people. They despise them. So it's so important that people get their information from other sources and other channels. And I think the key thing is in terms of moving the UK forward, is that we all maintain that level of solidarity and just stop the growth of I'm Northern Irish or I'm Scottish, and just see what we have in common with each other, because it's not a nice way to live. We have so much in common. The UK has achieved so much as a united country, and it is depressing right now, but hopefully we can keep moving things forward and keep together. Because when I was a wee boy, I was told that Northern Ireland would be gone in 10 years. I kept getting told that. Demographics, and here we are, 2020, and it's still an integral part of the United Kingdom, which is always pleasing.
Absolutely. And David, I mean, obviously, I know you've got to go. I mean, stay as long as you want. There's I don't have any problem with you staying for another hour. But just let people know, just before you shoot off, where they can find you, web address,
sure.
YouTube, Facebook.
If you just go onto Unity, just Google Unity News Network. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Gab, Telegram, YouTube as well. We've got an app. You can find us. The truth is, as a news organisation, we actually try and report the facts to the best of our ability. We don't make stuff up. We actually just try and get the facts out there and do it fairly. And yes, we admit this is what we believe. This is our agenda. Whereas the mainstream media lie and say that they're actually just reporting the news. It's not. It is liberal left propaganda that they are bombarding people with every single day.
And I think that's the key to all this is like you said just before you gave your credits out, that we've got to find a way of unifying all of these groups throughout the United Kingdom and standing together as one, because that's phrase that they had in the referendum campaign in 2014, better together, that's true. I mean, that's one thing the establishment got right. The United Kingdom is better together. And
100%.
David, you said about freedom, democracy, and there was something else you said. I mean, the UK freedom movement's mission statement talks about freedom, equality, democracy, and sovereignty. And I think that sums up what we all believe in. And I keep saying that to everyone. We've got to rally around something that we can all have in common.
Yep.
And I think every single true British person, they are British values and they're what we believe in. David, if you've got to go.
Thank you, Richard.
Fine,
I do.
I
really do. I appreciate you having me on the show, and we'll do this again in the future. Pleasure to meet you, John. And thanks to everyone for watching. I see you've got 160 watching, which is brilliant numbers.
Yeah, we're doing okay. We're doing okay.
Hit the thumbs up, because this is the future. Take care, guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
John. Thanks, David. Well, there you have. I mean, David's a great guy, and I think, John, the thing that came across there from David is that we're not fighting this on our own. And I know there's plenty of unionists in England, and again, I see comments on the feed about English nationalism. I understand the anger of English people who have been woken up to the bigotry of the so-called Scottish nationalists, but I don't believe those Scottish nationalists are Scottish patriots, because they don't really have Scotland's interests at heart. And I also don't believe that so-called Irish nationalists in Sinn Fein and the SDLP are Irish patriots, because they don't have the best interests of Ireland at heart either, in my opinion. The reality is the chaos and the destruction that would be pushed upon the United Kingdom if it split up. It could very easily be balkanized and turn into a violent confrontation between the different corners of these islands. Whereas, to me, we are far better working together. We can work together with the south of Ireland. We can work together with Scotland, England, and we can work together with the Northern Ireland, between nationalists and unionists, and that should be the way we're going. Anything else, any further attempt to destabilize Northern Ireland, I think, is actually evil. I would actually describe it as evil because of the destruction that it could potentially unleash. And let's be honest, if it did unleash that destruction would be foisted upon both communities, and we could very easily end up walking behind coffins on a daily basis, like we did in the 80s. And if anyone thinks, what's an Englishman doing talking about that, I walked behind coffins in the 80s as a British soldier, and I've lived here ever since. So I have a right to say what I'm saying. So yeah, John, what are your thoughts, John, on where we go with this? And you had some thoughts about things that were happening in Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland related issues. Just want to relay them?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, on the subject of how is it that we fix things, we've been through a lot of violence here in Northern Ireland. I mean, growing up as a child, from a young man in a place called the Shankill Road in Belfast, which seen a lot of trouble over the years. I mean, looking back, I can remember standing just shortly after the Shankill bomb and thinking that this has to stop, because people are recognizing no boundaries on the depths that they're prepared to stoop to get one over in the other community. And I guess when people would hear myself and others saying that, this has to be done in a peaceful way, it's not that we don't want to take a fight to our enemies, because believe me, it has to be done, and it has to be done ferociously. But you can fight things, in a smart way. You can work hard and work, or you can work hard, or you can work smart. And I believe that what we do need to do is we need to do things in a smart way, and we need our politicians behind us, and for the rights or wrongs. And I could be accused of sometimes putting our own politicians here behind the 8-ball to ensure that they move and to ensure that they stand up for our way of life. And look, that's how I believe that things can be done and things should be done. And I'm not saying that our politicians are our enemy, but they're certainly, to me, the politicians are the people that can take the wrongdoings to the the Westminster, or to your devolved assemblies, or to your council chambers, And I honestly believe, Richard, that what we need to do, and not just here in Northern Ireland, but whether it be in Scotland and Wales and in England also, is that I believe that people need to begin a process of getting together, standing together, and to put their politicians under pressure. And I don't mean in a bad way, but literally engage with your politicians and explain to them that here's a real concern. And what we want is we want these concerns ironed out. And we need to be seen as, put it like this here, there's always, I can remember a phrase by Ronnie Flanagan at a time of a scenario that had developed, that it was called Drumcree, and it's where orange men weren't allowed to walk down a road that they'd walked for hundreds of years. And you know, I remember Ronnie Flanagan, who was the then chief constable, and he policed Drumcree on the basis of that, well, there's the lesser of two evils. And the orange men, the Protestants, the Unionists, I mean, they won't just cause as much murder and mayhem and hassle as, say, the Nationalists and Republicans would. And that's how policing was implemented in Northern Ireland, based on the lesser of two 100%.
Evils. And actually,
thing is that I would say that what we need to show to our politicians is that we need to show them that, look, listen, you can turn a blind eye to what's going on if you want, but we have to show them that we're not going to get off their backs. We're going to fight at their heels. We're going to ensure that they do the right thing and they stand up for our people.
I agree. And I think one of the things, you know, you're talking about Drumcree, I had a friend who was in the ops room in, I think it was in Mahon Barracks, and the para CO came in, and Hugh Ansley was chief constable at the time, and Hugh Ansley said to the para CO, I want you to stop these orange men and their loyalist supporters getting down the road. You use any measures you want. Now, Hugh Ansley was a chief constable from the south of Ireland, so he obviously didn't understand the ferociousness of an angry loyalist. But the para CO said, certainly I can stop the loyalists getting down that road, no problem whatsoever. How many body bags have you got, Chief Constable? Yeah. That's what the para CO said. He said, I'll stop them. He says, how many body bags you got? 400, 500? And I think we all remember what happened. The march was forced down the road, and basically Paisley and Trimble danced down the Galbaki Road, and the march got down. But the reality is, what that showed was that and the Republicans have done it far more often than the Unionists have done it. But it showed that with force of numbers, you can actually change the course of history and change events. And obviously, you know, we're not saying that people should do that, but the reality is there is something in people power, and if you can do that on a dusty road outside Portadown, you can certainly do it at the ballot box and by lobbying politicians and getting involved in the political process. And that's what I think we've always been encouraging right from the beginning. Since I've been involved in this movement, I've been encouraging people to engage in the political process and stand for election, win elections, call your politicians to account. You see, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists that think that doing those sort of things doesn't make a difference. It 100% does make a difference. If you call your local politicians to account, they will listen, because they want your vote. And especially with social media, if they ignore you, you can make a YouTube video a week later saying they completely disregarded my opinions, get this shared everywhere. So we do have a lot of power. I want to go on now, John, to Black Lives Matter. Again, I want to play something that shocked me that I saw earlier on today. And I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter is not what it seems to be. Black Lives Matter is not a black civil rights movement. I don't believe that for a minute. I believe it's a far left, ideologically driven organization that is backed by hardcore Marxists and socialists. But I want to show you something that happened in Downing Street, just in case anybody hasn't seen this. So just bear with me, guys, while I get this up on the screen. Now, to me, that is. I personally, I won't bow the knee to any man. The only person that I would ever bow the knee to would be God. I'm not going to bow the knee to any man, no matter what color he is, no matter what his grievance. I'm not going to get down on my knee to a man. And what those people encourage that police officer to do, and it's happening right the way throughout the US, and it seems to be great. You know, everybody thinks it's really trendy to bow the knee in front of black men. Imagine if white men were going to black men in the street and saying, "I want you to get on your knees to me, black man. I want you to get on your knees." Can you imagine if we were doing that? It would be rightly condemned as outrageous racism. And in the same way that I have been very vocal in criticizing ethno-nationalism on the white English side of things, let's say, I find what organizations like Black Lives Matter are doing absolutely abhorrent. I find it racist because, just as the Luton Lion has said here, Antifa have hijacked Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. And that's been my mantra ever since I've been involved in this. And I think yours as well, John. And these people often quote Martin Luther King Jr. What was Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous phrase? What did he say? He said, "It's the contents of a man's heart that matters, not the color of his skin." That was Martin Luther King Jr.'s mantra. And he would literally be spinning in his grave, seeing what a lot of these people are thugs, a lot of these people are rioters, a lot of these people are going out there to damage property. And they've been indoctrinated with this mantra that everything to do with the white man is evil. It's extremely dangerous. And again, tonight we're talking about the threats to the UK. This is going to be an equal threat to the UK as the SNP, Sinn Fein IRA, the SDLP. These people are going to be threatening the UK in exactly the same way. And as I believe the ethno-nationalists will. And what could happen here unless right-minded people step in and start talking? We could be in a situation where the whole of the United Kingdom is torn apart by by violence that is based on ethnic, religious, nationalistic lines. It would make the Northern Ireland Troubles look like a tea party. And that's what I'm against. That's what I'm standing against. I'm standing for a united kingdom and against these lunatics that are going down there. Tell us about John Brewer, John, and what he told you.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Richard, that we have came to this point so quickly, because just a few weeks ago, yourself and myself, we discussed the ethno-nationalism and the rise of ethno-nationalism throughout the Western world. And as I said to you, I met a professor, a guy that's involved in the George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace. He's also involved in the UN. And the reason why I went to meet that man was because that I wanted to have a chat about how that they were getting things drastically wrong. And I sort of said to him that, look, you people are causing a situation whereby that people are actually being driven apart. And you don't create togetherness by forcing it, because nothing that is ever forced is ever accepted willingly. Now, what seems to be happening right now, and I notice it with this Black Lives Matter, and let me just give you a bit of context here. I mean, for those people that know me and know me very well, they'll also know that I have a great deal of friends, basically from the African community, and people that I call my real friends. And I have to say that, in terms of the Africans, I guess that, there's a lot of them, they're split on what's happening, because whilst that we can say that what happened to George Floyd, is that his name? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. What happened to George Floyd? I mean, it was completely wrong. But at the end of the day, that should be isolated to the policemen and the policeman who were involved in that, and it should be dealt with, and it should be dealt with swiftly, and that should be the end of it. I mean, there's no need for the rioting and the looting and all the things that are going on with it, and even to the point whereby, for the rights and wrongs of COVID-19, I mean, you just look at some of those protests, and there's no outcry from our media. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter to the media that people are standing together and they're huddled together in bunches, and they're not complaining that we're going to have an exacerbation of that. So it's a very dangerous situation. But why I met John Brewer a lot just before the COVID outbreak there was to have a good chat and to see if there was a way in which that we could begin an exploration of how it is that what we do is that we cater for everybody. I mean, I have a theory, and I call the theory equitable management of any given situation, which would lead to equitable arrangement. And what I mean is that if you take a working equation, you take all the different parts to this, you know, whether there's different ethnicities and there's different ideologues right throughout, say, the United Kingdom, and if we lay everybody's needs out there, I honestly believe if the will was there, what we could do is that we could arrive at an equitable arrangement which suits everybody. Now, everybody doesn't get what they want in an equitable arrangement, but certainly everybody gets what they need. And through doing something like that, what you do is you begin to foster better relations. And if you had an equitable management system put in place, then you would have the scenario whereby that if anything, I mean, in Northern Ireland, it works quite well at the interface areas, where that, you know, when some young people would be rioting or whatever.
Seem to have lost John there, but what I'm going to do while we wait for John to come back, I want to play another clip here, and this was from, I think, GMTV this morning. Sorry, John, I lost you there. I'm going to go into a little clip here, John, just from GMTV this morning. I think I played it to you earlier, and this was Piers Morgan asking, you know, if this guy would condemn the violence that was being used by the rioters certainly across America, and it looks like it's spreading now as well. But just listen to what the guy says. Just bear with me, guys.
Think about that.
To be honest, I think that's a reflection of the governments across the world, especially the UK and USA. They're founded on violence, founded on conquest, subjugation of black people and marginal.
Think about what this guy's just said. This guy's just said that the UK government is founded on racism and violence. Just think about that for a minute, folks. Is that true? Is that a true statement? And is he challenged? Just wait to see what happens. Does he get challenged?
People across the world. So this is reflective of how people are feeling, and this is what is demonstrated by the governments across the world. And these conquests are fueled by violence. And I think, to be honest, I think this is not just about white privilege. This is about white ignorance. This is about...
Can you imagine if you or I went onto GMB and stood in front of Piers Morgan and started talking about black privilege and started talking about black ignorance? Can you imagine the way that we would be treated? But first of all, by Piers Morgan, then by everybody else in the mainstream media. We would be vilified as racists. But what's happening, and this is why this is so dangerous, because what gentlemen like this man is saying feeds into what the white supremacists are saying. Because how can we go on to argue with the ethno-nationalists and so on and so forth when we're hearing people on the black side insulting everybody that's white and calling everybody that's white a racist? This, I think, we're in a very, very dangerous situation. I mean, there's other clips I could play as well, but you know, for the sake of time, I want to get this done in an hour tonight. I mean, what do we do about this, John? How do we stop this absolute madness on all sides from getting out of hand? Because I believe, even though we're banned by Facebook, we're demonized, I believe our movement, and I believe our movement is people that think in the same way as myself and David and you and Tommy and others. Our movement are moderates. We've been demonized and portrayed as extremists, but we're the genuine moderates here, and we're standing in that spot where we've got the far right attacking us, the far left attacking us, Black Lives Matter, the Islamists, the Irish Republicans, the establishment. Everyone's on our case, but I believe we're the ones that have actually got the solution to the problem. How do we fight this in the current climate of intimidation and fear that's going on?
Well, look, two things I'm going to say here, and first and foremost, because this is of paramount importance, is that how have we got to the stage that we're at? And that's because the conservative politicians gone down through the years, they've failed to actually stand up for the things that they should have been standing up against. I mean, they say that if there's a problem, you're best that you nip it in the bud before it festers, before it gets bigger. And the trouble is that it's been allowed to fester to the point where we are right now. Now, as I say, I believe that I'd be well qualified to speak about this because I've got many, many African friends, and let me explain to you that everybody that you see out there that are protesting for this Black Lives Matter, believe me, a lot of the UK citizens here and people, you know, throughout it, and even in Ireland that I know, they're not that type of people, and they wouldn't see themselves anywhere near any of those protests. And because the reality is that it's the same old suspects, Richard. It doesn't matter whether it's you know, whether they're winding up with regards to the LGBT rights, whether they're winding up with regards, you know, the poor you know, Muslim community in England or whatever. Look, if there's any area where these left-wing ideologues think that they can divide people and they can create a protest and they can, and their friends in the left-wing media, they can wind things up. If they think that they can do that, they will do it. So believe me, this isn't about a movement. This is about, like, it's anti-conservatism. It's anti-Britishness. It's anti being patriotic and proud to be you know, to love your country and to you know, to cherish your heritage and everything else. And in fact, as John Brewer said to me, and this is something that made me nearly fall off my seat, and this is coming from people that are meant to be shaping policy throughout the world. And he said to me, and I'll mention this again, he says that you know, Britain for the British, Ireland for the Irish, the United States for the Americans is pernicious and politically dangerous. So those are the dangers. Those people are the dangers. Those people that are driving policy and creating this division for their own ends are the real problem. And I would say go further, and I'll tell you this. You see, I mean, I've spoken to Africans in the last few days, and I've spoken to people who are older and wiser and who think like us. And I've spoken to younger Africans in the last few days who are caught up by the moment, and they've been listening to Black Lives Matter, and they think that they need to get out, and they're oppressed, and they have to stand up for their you know, all the racism and everything else that is going on. And that is the danger, because there's no media that is impartial, that's standing beside and saying, hold on a minute, this isn't the case. This is about a man who was killed by an American police officer, and there's where it ends. In other words, that man has to be dealt with by the law, as do the police officers that are surrounding him. I mean,
Exactly.
our media are winding it up, and Western worldwide,
I agree.
they're allowing this to happen. They're using this here to engage people, to stir people up, and believe me, they are creating a tinderbox right
They are.
across
And the reality is that was not, as far as I could see, that was a terrible, terrible assault that ended in that man's death. So it's probably manslaughter or third-degree murder, as they call it in America. The reality is that did not appear to be racially motivated. We don't know what was said or what was heard, but it seemed to be just, it could have been a white man. Remember the guy that used to sell newspapers in London? He was walking through London and a riot cop pushed him over and the poor fella dropped dead of a heart attack. We didn't take to the streets and blame every police officer and said, well, all policemen are bigoted against newspaper salesmen. And somebody very rightly, I've got it on the screen here, remember Lee Rigby? Lee Rigby, a private soldier in the British Army who'd served tours for his country, served in Afghanistan, was murdered while he was unarmed off duty by two black men. Now, I have never, ever, until tonight, I have never mentioned the ethnicity of the men that murdered Lee Rigby, because it's not relevant, because that was not a racially motivated attack. That was a religiously motivated attack. And they killed Lee Rigby, not because they were black. They killed Lee Rigby and because he was white. They killed Lee Rigby because he was a British soldier and because they believed the Quran told them to kill Lee Rigby. That's what that was about. It was nothing to do with race whatsoever. And this is the perverseness of what's going on in the country at the minute. Like you say, John, it's very, very dangerous. I think we'll wrap up here in the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Richard, just like you would know more about this than I do, and I'm asking you to do this for a reason, and this is just to prove a point that the mainstream media doesn't always tell people what's going on in the outside world. And there was a man not too long ago in Glasgow. Now, I don't know much about the case, and I think you'd be better placed to speak about it. But just tell the listeners what happened to a man in Glasgow not too long ago, and it involved fire. And tell, I mean, where's the people protesting about that? Explain the situation.
I don't have the details to hand, John. I mean,
I'll just tell you again what I've sort of, there was a young man that was burnt to death by.
There've been two incidents that I know of in the past decade, and again, I forget the gentlemen's names. One was a 16-year-old boy who was brutally murdered by Pakistani men in what seemed to be absolutely a racially motivated attack, because one of the things that people don't realize, there is a lot of anti-white racism within certain sections, certainly of the Pakistani community, without a shadow of a doubt, and I believe that's driven by religious ideology more than skin color. But there was one incident where, and I forget the gentleman's name. I do apologize for forgetting his name. There was one incident where a gentleman was, I believe, castrated, burned and murdered in Glasgow. He's a 16-year-old boy. I believe some of the men did go to prison, but I think some of them are out of prison now. And then I think what you're talking about, John, is another incident that's happened very, very recently, again in very, very similar circumstances, where a man was burned to death by a Pakistani gang. So yes, from what I can tell, there's more racism going the other way than there is coming, from white to coloured people. And I just want to say one thing more on that, just before you come on that, John. This terrible tag that has been created by, I don't know who's created it, but this idea of BAME people. What the hell are BAME people? And it stands for Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic. Now, if I was a black man, I would be quite insulted if I was all of a sudden lumped into being joined with Asians. If I was an Asian, I would be quite insulted if I was a Chinese person being lumped in with Pakistani Muslims from the Hindu Kush. So that blanket term is a divisive term to devise everyone with colour against every single white person. Whoever's doing that is extremely sinister. And, I just want to get in there before I forgot about that. But this whole BAME tag, it needs to be challenged. I think it's disgusting. I think it's absolutely a disgusting blanket term that any black or Asian person should be opposed to that.
Absolutely. Look, Richard, just sort of on that subject, and I can sort of, I guess I can close, and then you can...
Sorry, Chris Donnell was the guy's name. Sorry about that. It was Chris Donnell was the lad that was the 16-year-old lad that was killed. It's just, somebody put Chris up there, and it was Chris Donnell was the lad's name. Thank you for that, Lisa Marie.
And really and truly, and this is what I want to speak about, is that where was the mainstream media? Where was the Western world? Where was the protest for that young man who was burnt to death? Look, we're not here to sort of pit sides against each other. We're not here to suggest
we want the opposite of that.
It's black against white, or it's ethnicity against ethnicity. In other words, we want that stopped. We don't subscribe to that. And people,
exactly.
There are people right across let's explain it. There's people in the United Kingdom right now who have came here who want to make this place their home, and who want to blend in with the people, and they want to cherish who they are and what goes on in the communities, and mix in with British culture and the salt of the earth type people. And as I say, the trouble with what the mainstream media, and I'm going to blame the mainstream media here, because the mainstream media are stirring things up to such a point that they're putting everybody in a very dangerous position. And I guess that's a huge reflection on who's driving the mainstream media and why people shouldn't listen to the mainstream media. And if you're a politician, or if you're a political leader out there, look, we the people of the United Kingdom, the British people of the United Kingdom, who want nothing else other than to be left alone, to live in peace, to get on with their lives, with their families, you people need to stand with us to ensure that what we have is that we have our own mainstream media capability. And if the mainstream media are stirring things up, and if the mainstream media won't actually tell the stories exactly as they are, if the mainstream media want to cause division and cause conflict within our country, well, you know what? We need to go after the mainstream media, and we need to expose the people within the mainstream media who are stirring this up for ideological reasons.
Exactly. And I mean, the reality is that the mainstream media get an easy pass. I mean, I keep going on about Piers Morgan on my channel. I think Piers Morgan is one of the most sinister, manipulative, and wicked men on British television. He's arrogant. He's opinionated. And he's been caught at it. He was caught at it with the phone hacking. He was called a recruiter for Al Qaeda by a brigadier in the British Army in the early 2000s while the Iraq War was on. He's probably responsible by his words and deeds for the deaths, certainly of British soldiers, and goodness knows who else. And that man is paraded on the TV. And like you say, when he's interviewing people who have racist opinions, as long as their colour's not white, he will go at them like he'll go at a white man that's saying things that are racist, and quite rightly so he should, but he's never going to go against a black man or a Muslim who is attacking white people or people of a different religion. And that is the problem that we've got. And that's what's causing division. And that's what's causing the rise of a real far right. And, that's a very, very dangerous situation. But like you say, John, I mean, what we've got to do, this is what we've got to do here, is basically have our own media where we can talk about these things. We can broadcast. I mean, these videos I do, they don't get tens of thousands of views. Maybe they get a couple of thousand views, but that's a couple of thousand people who have heard the message that we're taking, which is a message of hope and a message of unity and a message of solidarity and a message to say the mainstream media are liars, don't believe them. And we're going to close off here because we've gone for an hour. I mean, that's quite a short one for us. Normally we go a lot longer than that, but I must admit I want to get down for a swim before it gets dark. It's been a good conversation, John. John, what about your channel and your social media? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you'll find me at Forgotten Voices Media on both on the YouTube and also on Facebook. So I encourage people to join us because really, as I say, look, I mean, I make no mistake about it, is that I stand for Britishness. I stand for the United Kingdom. I mean, I'm accepting of other people. And all that we want is an easy time. We don't want to be put into the circumstances where we have to fight for people. And if that means standing up against our politicians and standing up against those who are trying to wind us up and trying to cause problems within our country, that's what we have to do. So I would ask people that if you have any problems, come and see us. We'll do the story for you, and we'll stand up for ordinary, decent people who are having a rough deal and having an unfair deal within politics, I guess, and within our media. So, Richard, I'd like again to thank you once again for bringing me on, and I hope everybody sort of they enjoyed the time, and I do look forward to speaking to David Clews again, both here and on his own channel.
Well, yeah, thank you, John. And I think, what we're doing is we're building something here gradually. We've got obviously UK freedom movement going. We've just started a new project with Simon Bean, Veterans for Truth and Freedom, which again, we're going to be encouraging all veterans to join, because again, it's not going to be a religious or political or racial in any way, shape or form. It's literally veterans who want to stand up for truth and freedom, want to see the truth told about all these issues, about the persecution of veterans, about the lying mainstream media, about the attacks on the United Kingdom. We've obviously got John with Forgotten Voices. We've got things, there's friends of ours on Facebook with things like exposing the Republican narrative. So there are a lot of really good channels out there that are talking about these things, and we've got to be. Some people wonder why we're a little bit more circumspect now than we used to be when we talk about certain things and certain ideology and religion. Well, the reality is we have to be, because if we're not, we'll lose our channels. And at the end of the day, without compromising what we believe, and I think everybody can tell by these streams exactly what we believe and exactly where we're coming from. If we go too hard on one subject or on one specific ideology, we'll just lose the channel. And it's pointless, because obviously we've got to try and communicate to people that aren't in our little bubble, in our little circle. And we can only really do that through things like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and the mainstream channels. What we eventually need is our own social media that will attract people from a wider spectrum. But at the minute, we're going to have to just be a bit circumspect. I mean, I'm banned from Facebook anyway, for my associations with Tommy. but we don't want to burn our YouTube channel, so we'll just be a little bit careful on how we treat certain things and speak about certain things. But anyway, listen, thanks very much for watching. We had some good viewing figures tonight. It always warms my heart to see people staying and commenting on the feed, even if the comments are critical. You know, we don't mind criticism. We're not gonna, well, we might censor some people. It depends on how out of hand they get. But we like to have a good, honest debate, and let's keep doing this. Thanks everyone for listening. The other thing I do want to talk about is myself and Simon are going to be doing a live feed, not next week, but the week after. Simon's just moved house, Simon Bean, and he's basically we're going to be joining together. We're going to put some strategy together on what we want to do with Veterans for Truth and Freedom. So that's going to be 2 weeks' time. And next week, I hope I'm not wrong on this. I think we've got Steve from Speaker's Corner. And if you don't know Steve, he's also known as Atheist Steve. And he's the nicest atheist I know, and I think he says I'm one of the nicest Christians he knows. So it'll be good to sit down and have a chat with Atheist Steve next week, and we want to see what's happening at Speaker's Corner, and again, you know, what's happening with lockdown at Speaker's Corner, and when they're going to be able to get back up and running, and what's happening with the Islamic jihad, the dawah that's taking place at Speaker's Corner. And it is jihad. It's the jihad of the tongue, and we'll talk to Steve about that, and we'll maybe get another couple of guests on there that are well versed in that. Again, Jim, Mickey, thanks, Baba, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week at 7:30. Thanks for watching. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.